All right, everybody, and welcome to Intro to Python, a crash course in programming. This is, of course, brought to you by the Warsaw School of AI, a member of the global community called School of AI. You can get more information at theschool.ai. Also, today we are at Startberry, a great venue, a wonderful venue. It's in Warsaw, Grochowska Street, so if you're in town, check that out. All right, so what is the deal here today? Who am I? Well, my name is Martin Krzyzewski. I'm a developer, analyst, content editor, dev skiller. I'm a co-founder at improv.pl. I'm dean of the Warsaw School of AI. I'm the host of the LDuck podcast, so that's about me. That's all you need to know. So what is Python? This is taken right from Wikipedia. It's an interpreted high-level programming language for general-purpose programming created by Guido van Rossum and first released in 1991. Python has a design philosophy that emphasizes code readability, notably using significant white space. It provides constructs that enable clear programming on both small and large scales. So it is definitely something that you want to learn more about for sure. It's ranked was one of the top languages in the world, and this is what the documentation looks like. There it is. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, let's get through this intro. So who uses Python? Well, a lot of different companies use Python. We've got Dropbox, we've got Instagram, we've got IBM, we've got Netflix, we've got Spotify, we've got Facebook, we've got Google, we've got Reddit, and plenty more. It is very common and popular and well respected. So why should I learn Python if I'm not a software engineer? You can automate boring tasks. You can help manage a complex personal project. You can develop a tool for your family or friends. You can learn about other subjects while learning programming. So it's something that is incredibly flexible, versatile, and powerful. So isn't Excel, Google Docs good enough? Well, Python is for much more than just number crunching. It's capable of doing all the following: web development, data analysis, task automation, data collection, data processing, and more. The Zen of Python, let's do this. Let's get through the Zen of Python. Beautiful is better than ugly. Explicit is better than implicit. Simple is better than complex. Complex is better than complicated. Flat is better than nested. Sparse is better than dense. Readability counts. Special cases aren't special enough to break the rules. Although practicality beats purity, errors should never pass silently, unless explicitly silenced. In the face of ambiguity, refuse the temptation to guess. There should be one, and preferably only one, obvious way to do it. Although that may not be obvious at first unless you're Dutch. Now is better than never, although never is often better than right now. If the implementation is hard to explain, it's a bad idea. If the implementation is easy to explain, it may be a good idea. Namespaces are one honking great idea. Let's do more of those. So that is the Zen of Python, and that gives you pretty much a pretty good idea of both the humorous origins of Python, which is obviously named after Monty Python, the very famous comedy group. But it also gives you some really useful tips that you can sort of refer back to if you're working in Python and you run into some issues. You can just read through this and maybe get some inspiration. All right, so let's get into the live coding. I, right now, will be using Python version 3.6.4. Now, I could just go and type Python and use the interpreter here, but I want to do something a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of that, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the IPython interpreter, which allows just as much interactivity, but it also, of course, allows you to get a little bit better code highlighting and some other additional features. So here we are in IPython. Again, you see it's the Anaconda version, and what this allows you to do is just go right in and write Python. So for example, I want to tell you guys that this is a comment. This is a comment. Okay, and a comment is not going to be executed. A comment is simply just going to be something that someone can read and say, oh, okay, that's a comment. So the first thing I want to talk about is strings. Strings are a type of variable in Python, and there's a lot of things you can do with strings. So let's say that we have a string. We have a string called name, and we want that name to be John Smith. Okay, and that is great. That's wonderful, but it's not really interesting, right? We have John Smith. If I go ahead and write the name, then that just prints John Smith. Doesn't really, it's not very interesting. So let's kick it up a notch. Let's say that I want to find out how many words there are in this name. Well, it's pretty easy to do. I'm going to call name. I'm going to hit the dot, and I'm going to write split. Let's see what that does. So that is awesome. This is so cool. So we've taken a string name John Smith, and using the split operator, I've actually broken it up into 2 words, and the words are contained inside of a list. Okay, so that's a very important thing. Is now we have 3 different things we've learned, right? We can make comments in Python, we can create string variables, and we can use the split function to turn the string into a list of words. Now, here's what's cool. Now, if I go to name, it's still John Smith, right? So what happened to that list? Well, the thing is, I actually made that change in place, but I didn't actually change the original variable. So when I called split on name, it simply showed me the result as if it changed the value of name, but it doesn't actually change the value, just simply outputs the result. Now, what I can do if I want to make that permanent is I would say, for example, words in name equal name dot split, and let's see what that does. So if I say give me words in name John Smith, right? Now that's a step further. That's a step in the direction we want to go for. So we know that words in name is a list, but do we know for sure? Well, if you want to know for sure what something is in Python, what you have to do is use type and then words in name and watch what that does. List. We can do that with other things too. Let's go type name is a string, right? So those are two sort of types that we have, right? We have a list and a string. That's great. But what if we want a number? What if we want a birth date, right? Or let's make it birth year. Okay, so the birth year is 1945, right? Now, if I do type on this, I wonder what's going to happen. So let's see what happens here. So, okay, that's an integer. All right, so we have lists, we have strings, we have integers. This is great. This is getting more interesting, okay? Already with this, there is a bunch that we can do. There's a bunch we can do, and let's go forward and let's see what we can do. So first, let's go to the list. Okay, so we have the list, which is called words and names. So let's figure out how long that list is. Now, of course, it's easy because there's 2, we can count it. But let's say we couldn't count it, we don't know. So we can actually use something called the length operator, and we do length words in name 2. Okay, that tells us that there are 2 words in that name. That's pretty cool. Okay, what else can we do? All right, so there's something else. So we've learned about strings, integers, and lists, and that's all fine and dandy. But I also want to tell you about something else that you can do with lists, which is you can do list comprehensions. Okay, and list comprehensions are pretty interesting because list comprehensions allow you to kind of get a lot out of very little. So just follow along with me for now. Let's say you have another list, a list of numbers, and it looks like this: 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. Okay, you got this list of numbers, and that's all fine and dandy. But let's say that you wanted to create a new list where you took the list of numbers, and for every number in that list, you added the number 3. What would you do? So I would say, for example, I would create something called numbers plus 3 equals, and then watch this. I'm going to create a list, but it's going to be different. So I'm going to say num for num in numbers. Actually, no, sorry. Num plus 3 for num in numbers. And then I'm doing this. I'm saying I want to take a list comprehension and assign it to the value numbers plus 3. And inside that list comprehension, I want to take for every single number in numbers, I want to add 3 to that number. And I want to return all of that as a list. Let's see what happens. Okay, so nothing happened. Of course, something happened, but it assigned it to the value numbers plus 3. Okay, whoa, that's cool. So it took the list numbers 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and it did some math, and now we have 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Now that's cool. We got this list of numbers, and that's handy. But what if I want to figure out like the total value of all those numbers, right? So what I do is I use something called sum, and I say numbers plus 3. Let's see what that does. 56. That's pretty cool. Okay. What about if I want to figure out the largest number? So I'm going to do max numbers plus 3. Boom. What if I want to figure out the smallest number? That's right, you guessed it. Minimum numbers plus 3. Okay, that's pretty awesome. Okay, so now, just to review, we've talked about comments, strings, integers, list comprehensions, right? And then we talked about sum, min, and max. Pretty amazing. Okay, so we're definitely going in the right direction with this. All right, great. So let's go ahead and continue. And so we know a lot of things that we can do here with Python, but this is just the very total beginning of the possibilities. The next thing I want to do is I want to try to work with sort of the things that we've learned with strings. So I want to go back to name. We have John Smith. Let's say I want to get the first letter of name. Well, what I would do is I would put the number 0 in brackets, for example. And this tells Python that I want the absolute first character of the variable name. Of course, we know what that's going to be. That is going to be the letter J, right? That is the letter J. So Python starts counting from 0, right? So Python starts from 0. So in Python, the first position of any list or item or number or variable is going to be 0. Okay, so make sure that you understand that. That is very important. That's one of those first things that everybody should learn about Python, is that the most important or first number is first item is always 0. Okay, so we got name. And we know that name here it happens to start with J, but we don't know what, for example, the initials are. So if we wanted to get the initials of name, one thing that we could do is remember that we had list comprehension. So let's say we create a new one. We're going to call it initials. And we're going to say that for name 0 in name 0 for name in names. Yes, okay. Word 0 for word in name dot split, right? So we're going to split the name into the words. For each of the words, we're going to just take the first letter and we're going to turn that into initials. Let's see what that does, if that worked. And I call it, and what do I have? I have the initials J and S from John Smith. Okay, so we continue on. So that is something you can do. Now also, you can call the last item of something, of different objects. That's done a little different way. So let's say that we want the last letter in the name John Smith. So what we do is we do name brackets -1, square brackets of course, and that is going to give us H. Okay, so in Python, when we want the last item of something, we actually, instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and writing in 7, and we want the 7th element, or the last element rather, then we just type in -1. That's going to give us the last element. Now what's cool and interesting and yet obvious, right, is if we want the second to last element, then let's see what happens if we do -2. What happens? We get T, which is the second last element. That's cool, that's fun, that's nice. But what if we want to do something else? What if I want the first 3 elements, right? That's something else I can do too. So I start at 0, and I do a colon, and then if I want the first 3 letters, that's going to be 0, 1, 2. Now remember, when you use this form in Python, I can't type in the number 2, because if I type in the number 2, it's not going to give me the last element. So when you specify the elements in this fashion, you have to add 1 to the last element. So if I want 0, 1, 2, I have to give 3, and that should give me the first 3 characters. It did, it worked. Okay, so that's another thing. So basically what we learned is that we can call the first item in a list using 0, the last item using -1, and a set of items using this form. So we're going to say x, x. So XX is basically the, in fact, I'll say like this, the start and the end, right? Okay, so that's cool. So we know how to sort of work with lists now, which is nice. It's nice that we can work with lists, but we have strings, we have lists. Let's play around with integers. Let's see what we can do with integers. We haven't done a lot with integers yet. So let's create a number. And let's say that number is 23,456. And if we put it out, okay, we got number there. What if I want to divide the number? Well, that's pretty easy. We take number divided by 2, and we have that, okay? Now, the thing is, when you use the division operator, it's always going to be a float. Let me just show you. Let me prove that to you. So say new number equals number divided by 2, and I'm going to say, what is the type for new number? And it is a float. Okay, so floating numbers, besides integers and floats, besides the complex things that happen behind the scenes, the important thing to keep in mind when you're just learning Python, for example, let's say I have a sentence, and it is, this cow is having a really amazing time at the park. Okay, so that's our sentence. What can we do with our sentence now? Let's see. Well, as I showed you before, we can count the number of words. We can, take the first letter of every word. We could make all of the words uppercase, right? So let's do that right now. Sentence upper. And so we've called the upper method on the string sentence, and this is now, much more impressive. Everybody's yelling. We can also do the opposite, so we can tone it down a little bit, and we can say sentence lower. So I pass the lower method to the string sentence, and that's going to make it all lower. I can also do sentence.title, which is going to make everything fit the title case. So that's cool. That's pretty useful when you're working with text. It's useful enough for different things. But let's say I want to do something else. Let's say I want to check if a word is in the sentence. So let's say my word is really. I'm interested in the word really. So I want to say, for example, really in sentence. Let's see if it works. True. Okay, that's pretty cool. So the really is in the sentence. If I say Mars in sentence, it's not in there, it's false. So that's something we can do. I can also do this. I can say, tell me where a certain word starts. That's kind of interesting, right? So how do I do that? So I take, for example, sentence.index, and then I take the word that I'm looking for, like really, and it's going to tell me 21. So 21 characters into sentence, I'm going to get the word really. Now we can do something else. Let's do something fun here for a second. Let's actually say that word is a variable and the word equals really. Okay. Now we have the word really, And what I want to know is what is the index of the word. So I'm going to say sentence index word, and that is 21. Okay, and then if I say what is the length of word, okay, that is 6. Let's say I want to remove the word really from the sentence. What I would do is I would say words equals sentence split. Let's take a look at words, okay? And I want to remove the word really. So I would say words dot find really words dot okay. There we go. So what I wanted to do is find out the position of the word really in the list words. Okay, so now we know that it's position 5. So what I can do now is I can remove that word. Okay, so what I ended up doing was basically saying that I have words, the index, the location of the word really in the list of words called words is 5. Then I went and I said, please go to words 5 and delete that. Then when I look up words, I have this cow is having an amazing time at the park. So we removed the word really. And then if I want to turn that back into a sentence, we can also do that by having basically 2 quotes and a space in the middle. And this is going to be join. And then what do I want to join? I want to join words, and I've got the sentence, this cow is having an amazing time at the park. Now that is actually, that's bad grammar, right? So we want to say this cow is having an amazing time at the park. And the one way we could do that is, for example, we want to find where the letter A is. But that's boring, right? So let's try this. Let's try to use a replace. And this is really cool. So I want to take the word sentence and I want to replace the word A, this time with spaces on either side. So we've got an A with spaces on either side, and I want to replace it with an with spaces on either side. And let's see what that does. Look at that, okay? So I essentially use the replace modifier on the string sentence to replace the letter A with an. So now it says this cow is having an really amazing time at the park. Which is actually the wrong. Oh, that is weird. This cow is having an. Oh, because it added. Okay, I get it. All right. So what happened is going all the way back. If we go to words, as you can see, there is no really, but I didn't create the new sentence when I joined the words. So I would say new sent equals dot join words. And then watch this. Now new sent. Okay. Now new sent is this cow is having a amazing time at the park. And let's say that I want to replace. So I want to take new sent dot replace, and I want to replace A with an. Okay. Let's see what that does. Okay. This cow is having an amazing time at the park. Wonderful. But of course, if I type in new sent now, that doesn't work. So what's cool is in IPython, if I hit the up arrow, I can go all the way back and I can actually scroll through the things that I've done before. And if I look for new sent replace, let me see, there I have that. So what I can do is say fixed equals new sent replace, and then I type in fixed, and I have this cow is having an amazing time at the park. Okay, great. Now, of course, I want to add a period to the end of the sentence. So I think the best way to do that is to say fixed dot sorry, fixed -1. Sorry. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to actually say fixed plus period. Fixed. Of course. Okay, so we have to say fixed equals fixed plus period. Fixed. Okay, great. So if we want to add something to the end of a string, we can do that. It's called string concatenation. So if I have, for example, the horse, and I do a plus, and I will say is not having a good time in the hospital. That puts it together. The horse is not having a good time in the hospital. Okay, so we found out that we can use string string concatenation to basically take two strings and combine them. Okay, so there's really just a ton of things you can do with strings. We also found the replace function, and we found the index function, and we also talked about conditionals by asking if that word is in that sentence. Okay, so I think that's pretty good for basic strings. The next thing I want to show you guys is how to do regular expressions in Python. Okay, actually, I just realized before we go into regular expressions, I do want to talk about operators, and these are really important. So let's just go into this real quick. So let's go back to strings. We're going to talk about operators, and we have a very large collection of operators in Python. So for example, if I want to know if the number 3 is greater than 4, then I can do that. 3 is not greater than 4, that's false. If I can say is 3 less than 4, then of course that's true. I can say is 3 less than or equal to 4, and that is true. I can say is 3 greater than or equal to 6, and that is false. I can also say is 3 not equal to 9. That is true, okay? And I can say 3 is 3. I can say 3 is 12. Okay, I can even say 3 is -3. That is false, right? So that's great. And I can say is not, so I can say 3 is not 3, and that is false. Okay, so those are just a really great intro to sort of basic operators that we can use there, and I think they're really quite useful. Again, Python has a ton of capabilities. Something that's really great is if we import the math library within Python, we can do a couple more things. So for example, let's say I have a number like this. I have a number called or a number with a value of 12.34, and I want to get it to round down. So what I do then is I do math dot floor, and I say num, and it's going to round it down. If I want it to round it up, I say math dot ceiling, and that's going to round it up to 13. I'm not going to get into bitwise operators right now. That can be for another video. I just want to sort of get into the really important things that you need to build a web scraper, and also just for basic math, basic Python things that you're going to be working on. Okay, cool. So that's nice. That's awesome. We can do some simple math. We can also multiply. Is that a float includes something after a decimal, right? So if I have an integer, for example, 34 is an integer, but 34.5 is a float. I'm not going to get into the differences between floats and integers. I just want you to know that that those are two different ways of storing a number. Now we're going to talk about sort of some things that we can do with lists. So if we want to have a list called L equals duck and hunter, then we have a list with 2 items, And if I want to add something to the list, I would do l.append, and then whatever I want to append to it. So let's say I would want to append house, and I would have l duck hunter house. Okay. Now let's see what extend does. If I want to extend that, I would get something a little bit different. Okay, so if I'm extending a single word, it's going to split that word up into a bunch of pieces. Now, I don't really like that, so I'm going to do l delete -1. And that totally did not work. That completely failed. But I'm going to try to remove it. That also doesn't work. What could I do? What if I do l? Okay, delete l -1. Okay. So now if I do l, no, I can't do that. Okay, so I want to get rid of this word that has been split up. How can I do that? Well, it's going to be pretty easy. All I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I want to delete everything after. Oh, this is really cool. So I want to delete everything after the word house, and that is 0, 1, 2. That is the third letter in, so we're using starting from 0, counting. So I say that I want to start at the word house, but that's not true because it's going to include that, so I want to start at the next one, which is the third letter. And so I want to start at index 3, and then I do my colon, and I don't do anything else, just square brackets. And then let's see what that does. Okay, now let's look at L. Whoa, okay, so I've gotten rid of that word that I didn't want. But if I have L, and I want to extend it by inserting some list. So I have trees, and I have stumps, and then I want to extend that. That's what that does, okay? So these are things you can do with lists. Okay, so lists are great. So we've talked about lists. But we can also talk about sets. Okay, so if I have a really large number of items, let's say that I have something like this, H equals dog, cat, house, mouse, 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 cat, 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 frog, animal, no, cow, cow, person. Okay, so I have a bunch of words, and what I would like to know is how many unique words are in this sentence that we call H. Pretty easy to do. First of all, what I want to do is I want to create a variable called H, and I'm gonna give it the split modifier, and I'm going to say H split, and that should give me a list of words. Now I have a bunch of words, so if I do a length of words, it's going to tell me there's 13 words, but I want to know the unique words, right? So if I say unique equals, for example, set words, watch this. So unique is the set of words, and what's amazing about set, first of all, it's an immutable type. So once you create a set, it's a mutable type, so which means that you can sets can be changed. Okay, so if I want to add an item to set, it's really cool. So I take unique and I say add, and I can say horse, and I will add a horse to that set. Now if we look at unique, we have horse. Now here's what's really cool about unique, about the set I mean, is if I try to add cat to the set and say, oh, I'm going to put 2 cats in there, right? Cat is not defined. Of course, not defined because I didn't enter it in as a string. Okay, so I want to enter in cat into unique, and then watch if there are 2 cats. There are not 2 cats, right? Because sets will only have exactly 1 item, and that's really great because there are many uses where you have a whole bunch of items and you don't actually want a bunch of items. You just want the unique items. Okay, so right now we're going to be talking about functions, and in Python, a function is an object, and it's one that is essentially able to be used in any part of the your application. So even if you're creating a very simple script, you can use functions, and you don't need anything more than just the functions. Okay, so if we have, for example, def is the way that you define a function in Python, and then you give the name of the function. So add 2, and then I'm going to say number. And what I'm going to say here is then return number plus 2. That's it. That's our function. That's all you have to do to have a function in Python. So if I say add 2 and my number is 45, the answer should be 47. That's that simple. And that's your function. That's all you have to do with with Python to have a function. It's a lot easier than when you're getting into classes. Then it's going to be a little bit more complicated, but we can get into that in a second. That is a function. And if I want to create a function, for example, that we were talking about before with so taking a word and splitting it up into all the letters. Let's try that again. Okay. So if I have a word, or if I have a sentence, the horse is feeling tired today. Okay, that is my sentence. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to create a function that will take it'll take all the words in the sentence, it'll count how many words there are, and it'll give me the longest word and the shortest word. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so the first thing I've done is I've created a simple sort of skeleton of the function, sendStats, and all it's going to do right now is going to take a sentence that we give it, and I'm going to use sentence, and it's going to print the length of all of the words, right? But let's say I want to know what the longest word is, okay? And this is how we're going to do it. We're actually going to use we're going to use a dictionary. Okay, so here's another item in Python. It's called the dictionary, and let's try it. So let's do mouse up or up arrow, and we have a word sentence split. So right here, right here, I want to create a dictionary called all words. Okay. All right. And then for word in words, I want to, instead of printing the length, I want to use that as the key in the word. So for example, I'm going to say all words, length of word equals word. And then I want to return all words. Let's see what that does. Okay, let's try it again. Stats sentence. Okay, so what that's done is it's going to ignore the sort of collisions. So if there are two words that are the same length, it's just going to take the most recent version, but it's going to help us to get the longest word. For example, one way we can do that is I can say if we have the keys in the dictionary, because the dictionary has, of course, keys and values, and that's it. Okay, so what is Python? Requests. All right, so what is web scraping? Web scraping, web harvesting, or web data extraction is data scraping used for extracting data from websites. Web scraping software may access the World Wide Web directly using the Hypertext Transfer Protocol or through a web browser. While web scraping can be done manually by a software user, the term typically refers to automated processes implemented using a bot or web crawler. It's a form of copying in which specific data is gathered and copied from the web, typically into a central local database or spreadsheet for later retrieval or analysis. Okay, so web scraping, it's all about getting data from the internet in a way that's more or less automated. And you can, of course, do that with Python. We're going to show you how today. So what is a REST API? Representational state transfer, REST, is an architectural style that defines a set of constraints to be used for creating web services. Web services that conform to the REST architectural style, or RESTful web services, provide Web services that conform to the REST architectural style, or RESTful web services, provide interoperability between computer systems on the internet. REST-compliant web services allow the requesting systems to access and manipulate textual representations of web resources by using a uniform predefined set of stateless operations. What does that mean? That means that if you want information from, let's say, Facebook has an API, which means that they've described in very specific detail what you need to do in order to get data from their website in an automated way. That means if you have a script, that script sends certain data, like, for example, some header information to Facebook, and then the Facebook API responds with a JSON response, and then you can do whatever you want with that data. So it's an incredibly easy way for organizations, companies, nonprofits, everybody, to allow outsiders to gain access to data on the server, but in a very controlled manner. And you can create a REST API yourself using Python in a matter of maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But if APIs exist, why would I waste my time to write my own scraper? So if there is data that you'd like to get access to and available via the website, but not via the API, one of the only alternatives is to use a web scraper you've created, or use a service that will scrape the data for you. So actual web scraping businesses, there's money to be made from web scraping. That's the truth. You got to, obviously, there's things you have to consider. But here are 3 examples of actual real businesses that exist. You can collect all the company job post pages in the world and sell access to the data. So a company that does this very similar thing is called VacancySoft.com, and then what they do is they collect recruitment data, I believe, for companies in the UK. You can also collect the mugshots of people from all of the police databases in the USA and offer to remove them if the person in the photo pays to have them removed. That's mugshots.com, and I believe they were actually shut down for that, because it turned out that that was not fair to people. It was like sort of blackmail or something like that. So they had trouble with that. But again, that raises also some issues that we're going to talk about in a second. Another idea is collect all the world's data and let people search for Google. Google is a giant web scraping robot. It's a bot, and it scrapes data and collects it, analyzes it, and then gives you the results. All right, so ethics of web scraping. What are the ethics of this whole entire process? Well, it turns out that you should follow these rules. Okay, there's some basic rules you need to follow, because remember, every call to a server uses electricity, uses server time, uses a computer's resources, and someone's paying for that. So it's great if you follow these ethical rules, at least the most important ones. So first of all, collect only the information that you need. Okay, if you, for example, need just the amount of likes that a certain Facebook page has, there's no reason for you to collect the entire Facebook fan page. Just, go to the Facebook API, figure out what you need to do to get that information, and then pull that data out. Even if that data isn't available by the API, maybe there's some other way to do it. Don't ignore robots.txt. Robots.txt is a file that every website contains, and it's essentially a file that tells you what you can and cannot do with a web scraper. So it's going to tell you sort of what kinds of things you cannot run, what scripts you can't do, and we're going to show you a real quick example here. Here's some example, a few example robots.txt files. This is from BuzzFeed.com, and you see it's user agent, MSN bot, crawl delay, disallow, and these are all the different sort of categories or subpages that the bots will not be allowed to use. Okay, so that's from Moz.com. All right, try to run your own scrapers at times that are lower usage times for a website. This is not really applicable to like global sites, but if you know that, for example, your friend is asking you to scrape some data from his site for whatever reason, and you know that they have a busy, their busy time is like between noon and 2 o'clock, then just scrape it at 3 in the morning. Okay. And only write a web scraper if you need the information and the API is too limited. So if you want to get information from a website, always check if they have an API. Okay, just make sure they have an API, because if they don't have an API, then okay, I understand web scraping makes sense. But if they have an API, a lot of times you can get most of what you need, except with some strange edge cases. So check that out. Always Google or try to search around for an API for that site. Okay, the other thing is the dangers of web scraping. So here's just two real quick stories that people ran into, the problems they ran into. So there was a man that was sued by Facebook, or was going to be sued by Facebook for trying to build a service around collecting Facebook data. This was a couple years ago. This was before the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal. And then a teen in Nova Scotia was arrested for downloading accidentally publicly posted government data. So what happened was in Nova Scotia, the government there, the local government, posted a bunch of data on the internet, and then they, I guess, they didn't want to do that, and it should have not been public. And this teenager found the data, and he's like, oh, this is public data, I'll just release it. And he got arrested for it, so be careful. All right, so what is a library? A library is also a collection of implementations of behavior written in terms of a language that has a well-defined interface by which the behavior is invoked. For instance, people who want to write a higher-level program can use a library to make system calls instead of implementing those system calls over and over again. So in Python, a library can be used to do any number of things. For example, like today we're going to learn about requests, which is a library for sending HTTP requests to a web server and getting some data back. And BeautifulSoup is for parsing data, HTML data, for example. And libraries are very often open source. They're free to use, free to download. There was some controversy recently that you have to be careful of, and we'll talk about those in a second. So how do I use a library in my project? It's pretty simple. Let's just show an example here of what we're going to do. So we're going to go to GitHub. And when we go to GitHub, we have the search bar. And let's say we want to do something, for example, parse HTML, right? We want to parse HTML. Let's do it. So what do we see? Okay, we see everything in here. It's a lot of stuff going on. What you want to focus on, especially if you're learning Python, is go over here to the Languages tab, column, and click on Python. You got 609 libraries that or repos that code repos that are under parse HTML. As you can see, one of the top ones here is this library. And this is a standards compliant library for parsing and serializing HTML documents and fragments in Python, HTML5 lib, and this can be used for parsing HTML. Okay, so once you find that library, read the docs. Okay, and as you can see, the docs for this library, for example, are right here. This is the whole README file, and a lot of times there's also, if you look around carefully, there should be also a link to maybe some external documentation, but this README file is pretty detailed, and in this README file you can go in and you can see exactly how to use this to parse your HTML. All right, install the library, of course. You want to do that, and you can usually use pip, just pip install and then the name of the library. Import the library, so you want to do that by just typing, in your Python project at the very top, you want to import all of your dependencies, and you can just write import in the name of the library once it's installed. Well, that's it, you're done. You can use the library, so that's pretty much it. All right, so what are the pros and cons of using a library versus writing a solution from scratch? So although there are many great libraries out there, make sure to do the following due diligence for using a library in a commercial or serious project. Okay, read the license. Okay, make sure that you can actually use it. If we go back to GitHub, what you can do is you can take a look at this right here. Right here, this is the license, and it tells you this is the MIT license, a short and simple permissive license with conditions only requiring preservation of copyright and license notices. So MIT license is one of the sort of most permissible licenses out there, and I definitely suggest that you use it for your project to allow everybody to sort of freely contribute and make your project better. There are some restricted licenses, so be careful, because there are licenses on GitHub where you download it, you use it, you put it in your project, and it turns out actually you need their permission to use it or to change it. So see also when the last commit was made. So if we go once more back to GitHub and we go to this library, we can see the history. We see 1,547 commits. Let's click on that, go in there. And what do we see? That the last commit was made 27 days ago. Now, that's not bad. But if you go into a project that you're thinking of using and the last commit was made over 6 months ago, then it might be better to find a library that's a little bit more fresh, up to date. And also make sure that there are valid, up-to-date, well-written docs. So if you are reading the documentation and it mentions, for example, using Python 2.7 and it doesn't talk about Python 3 at all, then maybe that means that the documentation is outdated or maybe you just need to find a different library. So this is Request HTTP for Humans. This is so cool. This library, and look at this. In this little bit of code here, you can request a page, you can get a 200 status code, you can get the headers, you can get the encoding, the text, the JSON. It's a very, very easy way to interact with regular web servers, not using an API call, but just interacting with the server itself, much as you would with a browser. Great documentation too. Go through this documentation, really read it. You got the introduction, tells you how to install request, quick start, and all the key features, really, making a request, passing parameters, response content. Make sure you go through at least all of the things here in the quick start, and then a lot of really nice, juicy, wonderful content in the advanced usage. So definitely check that out. A very powerful library, a lot of fun to use. So we're going to be talking about that in a second. All right, so let's do the live coding. So first of all, I import requests, and I have requests imported. So now I can do, for example, r equals requests get, and let's go to Wikipedia, and let's set a timeout. In this case, it's not very important, but a timeout will let me, if I'm scraping hundreds of thousands of sites, I don't want to wait for 10 minutes until something responds. So I set a timeout to avoid any issues, and I hit enter. And now, if I want to see if it worked, I'm going to check if I got a 200 code, and I got a 200 code. So the request worked. I was able to get the data, and let's take a look at what I was able to retrieve. So let's look at our text. Okay, so the response is coming back as an HTML file, which is expected, and it's just a bunch of source code, HTML source code, and so this isn't very useful. And so the next thing I want to do is use a different library, and we'll talk about that in a second. And what is BeautifulSoup? So BeautifulSoup is a Python library for pulling data out of XML and HTML files. It works with your favorite parser to provide idiomatic ways of navigating, searching, and modifying the parse tree. It commonly saves programmers hours or days of work. So if you think about an HTML document, let's just go into this this document here. I'm going to right-click on that, and I'm going to inspect it. And so I've got this data in here, but let's say that I want to get the anchor text, the prepared request. I want to get this text, right? Well, it would be really annoying to write a regular expression to try to grab that, or try to grab it just by looking for, certain patterns. It's a lot easier when you use a parser like BeautifulSoup. You can just say, just give me all the links, and from all the links, give me the link text, and it makes your life a lot easier. So that's a really, really great thing to use. All right, let's do the next coding. Okay, we're going to do the BeautifulSoup demo, and we're going to just go ahead and from BS4, import BeautifulSoup. Okay, now we have BeautifulSoup imported, and I want to say that my text equals response.content. And so I'm taking the raw HTML response, and I'm turning it into a variable, or I'm saving it all in the variable text. And then I want to turn text into soup. So I say soup equals BS text HTML parser, and that should give me a soup object. And there's a lot of cool things that I can do with a soup object. For one, I can have it print really nice HTML. So I can say soup prettify, and that will make it pretty. Okay, well, prettier than it would be normally. And then these are really great, is you can do something like soup title to get you the title of the page. Wikipedia, we can do soup title name, Okay, we can do soup p. Okay, there's a paragraph taken, the first paragraph. Let's see the first link. Okay, there's the first link taken from soup. We can also find all the links. So I can do soup find all, and this is going to give me all the links on the page. So that's pretty useful. And another thing I can do is I can say for link in soup.find all anchors, I can say print link get href. Okay, so that is going through all the links on the page, and it's giving me just the href that's associated with that link. Okay, another thing I could do is I could, for example, get all the headings. Okay, all the headers, all the headings, all the h1 tags. So the way I do that is I would say, for example, h1 equals soup find all h1. And I can say length of h1 1. So if I say h1.text, h1, it's interesting that didn't work. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Okay. What happened there was I was trying to. Okay, so I have h1 and for item in h1 print item.text, and those are the two h1 tags. Okay, we can also say soup find all, and I just want to find all the span tags. Okay, those are all the span tags. I can also do a list comprehension. I can say span text for span in soup find all span. Okay, so that's taking all the spans in the page and it's giving me just the text that's in the span. All right, everybody, we're back. So this is the final project that I created using requests in BeautifulSoup, and even I threw Selenium in there. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm importing requests, OS library, importing BeautifulSoup, I'm importing time, Selenium, and the first thing I do is I create a function. This one's called fetch links using Selenium. This was created specifically for situations where the basic request library doesn't work. I go ahead and fire up a headless browser, and then I take the data that way. And this is really pretty simple. I'm setting up a set object to hold just the unique links. I don't want to have duplicate links. I set Chrome options right here. Essentially, I get the base URL right here. I have it sleep for 5 seconds just because most sites are going to take a moment to load, and I don't want to have to custom write anything for, this should work with basically any site that you send this to. Okay, the next thing I do is I'm going to grab all the links from the page, and then for each of those links, I'm going to extract the href and then add that to the set object. The next function I have is called get all base URL links. So the way this scraper works is that it's going to take all of the links that it finds on one page, and then it's going to follow all those links and then collect all the links on all the other pages. So again, I create a set called unique links. I set the content length to 0. I'm going to get the raw data from the base URL using the response request get base URL. I'm going to check to make sure that the page response is acceptable. I'm going to check the content length. If the content length is acceptable, then I'm going to set the content length value to the length of the actual content that there is in the document. And then if the response code is 200, I'm going to assign the value of the binary HTML response to raw HTML. Then I'm going to convert raw HTML to a soup object for parsing. I'm going to fetch all the links from the page. Then for every link found, add href to unique links. Then I'm going to try to extract the href from the link. Then I'm going to add the href to the set of unique links, and then if that fails, I'm going to raise an exception, print the exception to console, and then I'm going to return the set of unique links. And if the response is 200 and the content length is less than 3000, that means the content failed to be served using requests. Then I'm going to print fetching content using Selenium, and then I'm going to go ahead and run the fetch links using Selenium function with the base URL, and that's going to create a list of links. And then again, I'm going to add all those links to the unique links set object, and then I'm going to return all the unique links. The next function I have is called fetch links from list of URLs. So it's going to take a list of URLs and it's going to get all the links for all the pages in those links. Okay, so right here I'm getting a list of URLs, and I'm calling the function get base URL links with a base URL. With open all URLs, I'm opening up basically a new text file, a blank text file, and I'm going to write all those links that I found to that text file. And then I'm going to go ahead and for each of the links on all the pages, I'm going to write that link to the file. And I'm also going to, prior to the link being written to the file, I'm going to write the actual source link that where that link originated from. And then I have a few final functions here. I've got add unique links to file. So I'm going to open a link as file object using as the same process I did before. I'm going to fetch all the links, and then for every unique link, I'm going to print the link to a new line. And then finally, I just have probably a function that might not be totally have a point here, but basically it's called app. It takes base URL, and it just simply fetches the links from the list of URLs. In fact, I can just get rid of these because I don't need these anymore. And then at the bottom, I just have if name equals main, and I have the school.ai as the base URL, and all this is going to do is allow me to go ahead and call that script from the command line. All right, so that was great. So we learned all about what is Python, what is Python capable of, what can we do with libraries, what are some of the interesting things about APIs? What are the dangers of web scraping, right? What do you have to watch out for? Well, we did a lot. We did coding. We had a lot of fun. What I want you guys to do is the next steps. These are crucial. We're going to do these every time we create content for you. We're going to challenge you to do the next thing. So take what you've learned tonight and create your own customized web scraping application to collect data that interests you. These are just some things you can try to do. Use the Flask web framework to create a simple admin panel to easily control your scraping application. The application should have the following features. Set the script schedule every 12 hours, 24 hours every week, every once per month, and set the base URL that the app will use when scraping. Post your code to GitHub so we can discuss it at the next Warsaw School of AI meeting. And the 2 best projects in terms of code quality and execution will be featured on our Facebook page and mentioned at the next meeting. So good luck. I hope you love this intro to Python. And if you have any feedback for us, go to our Facebook page and our soon to be launched website, which will be schoolofai.pl. So thank you very much.